So a US military aircraft carrying 104 Indians who are said to be illegal immigrants into the US landed in Amritsar this week. Now, after these people landed, some of them have spoken to the media and said that they were handcuffed and shackled, ankles and wrists and waist, the entire length of the flight, which could have been easily about 24 hours of that flight, where they were kept in chains. The opposition has actually created a lot of furore, saying that the manner in which these deportees were treated was wrong. The fact that they were brought in a military aircraft and not a normal, they were not sent in a normal passenger aircraft. They have also talked about, the opposition has pointed out the fact that the Prime Minister keeps saying that Trump is his friend, but it's not reflecting in the manner in which our countrymen are being treated. So that's what we're going to deal with in this video. Is there a problem with the shackling? Is it a human rights problem? Is it a diplomacy problem? Or is it the opposition kicking up dust where no problem exists, right? So let me start with the fact that this was a story, quoted in the midday. Jaspal Singh, one of the 104 deportees brought back to India, he first claimed that his hands and legs were cuffed through the entire journey, that they were unshackled only after landing in Amritsar airport. He's from Gurdaspur district, apparently. After that, as of this morning, the Hindu, the newspaper, has quoted one 18-year-old Robin Handa, who also arrived in Amritsar on the same flight. He said there were 19 women, 13 minors, including a 4-year-old boy. And he's saying that they were all handcuffed and their feet were tied with rope for 36 to 40 hours, including the children, he said. And this is, this is the Hindu quoting people that they have now spoken to who were on that flight. There are many stories from Jaspal. Remember, Jaspal was quoted, who said that he had paid 30 lakh rupees to an agent to take him legally to the US, but what happened instead was that he was flown to Brazil, where he stayed for 6 months and then made to cross over illegally. These are the stories coming from others as well, who said there's one individual called Harvinder Singh who said he was taken to Qatar and then Brazil and then Peru and then Colombia and then Panama, then Nicaragua, then Mexico, and then made to cross. They talk about, actually having to walk in a very, very dangerous way, where people were actually dying en route and they were taken in that manner and they were cheated out of their money, and that is a major problem, and I'll come back to that. But coming back to the shackling and the manner in which these people were sent home, I want to remind you that this is coming just a couple of days now before our Prime Minister travels to Washington DC to meet with Donald Trump. So the question is, did America have to do this now? Could they have waited until the Prime Minister was there and they had a conversation in person and ironed out those details? Were they trying to send us a message here? Is Trump being a bully, right? The opposition across the Congress, the Samajwadi Party, have criticized that these are human beings and not prisoners, and the manner in which they were treated were completely wrong. And a lot of questions were raised in Parliament. Remember, the budget session is on. So the External Affairs Minister has answered. It was a very noisy Lok Sabha session. He spoke over the noise and he answered some of the questions that were asked. And he basically said that the process of deportation is not new and every country has the right to crack down on illegal immigrants and send people back home. He has said that it is standard operating procedure to deport by an aircraft, and it provides, and the US's policy, he said, provides for the use of restraint. But he went on to say that as far as, food and other necessities, medical emergencies, bathroom breaks, they were temporarily unrestrained, and all of those were followed just as they would have followed on a civilian aircraft, on the military aircraft as well. He illustrated, in order to illustrate his point, he said that from 2009, 15,500 illegal immigrants were deported from the US into India. And he has also said that these deportations are organized by the US by ICE, which is the authority in charge, and they follow their standard operating procedure. And he has said, and I'm quoting, "We have been informed by ICE that women and children are not restrained." Okay. He has also now, we understand, said that the government is seriously now working on a policy or a new law to actually crack down on these agents who are taking people illegally. And he said that should be our focus. We should be looking at cracking down on this illegal immigration from this end and not so focused on the shackling, right? Let me just take you a quick detour as to what is ICE. To give you some context, after the 9/11 attacks on America, they started a new department called the Department of Homeland Security to look at who is coming into their country. Now, Department of Homeland Security has two major agencies. One is called the Immigration Customs Enforcement, ICE, and the other one is called the Customs Border Protection. Customs Border Protection actually patrols the borders and makes arrests at the borders when people cross the border, and ICE is responsible for removing those who are illegal from the country. So now you know. So normally in America, how deportation works is that if law enforcement, so a regular police person comes in contact with someone who doesn't have the right identification, it turns out they're illegal, they're immediately moved to an ICE facility. If the person, and ICE has detention facilities which are separate from their normal jails. So if it turns out the person has been in the country for more than 2 years, they're presented before an immigration judge. For less than 2 years, they're deported immediately. They're allowed one bag of 18 kilos and they're out. So that is the procedure that they follow. There doesn't seem to be anything wrong with that so far, because as international law says, if it's in your country, on your land, you do as per your policy and laws. Once you land in our country, it's as per our country. But what happens on the way? Now, the UN Human Rights Committee has criticized excessive shackling in deportations as a violation of civil and political rights. That's one. The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees and the High Commissioner for Human Rights has advised, that office has advised, that shackling should only be used when it's absolutely necessary and when there is a problem. It should not be applied in a humiliating and excessive manner, and it should be proportionate to the security risk of the individual. So these women and these children and this 4-year-old boy, were they posing a security risk to the guards on this ICE flight, or did they pose in any way a risk that they will run away from the flight if they had been unshackled? These are questions to ask. There's also an international aviation law on which basically says, so the International Civil Aviation Organization standards allow for shackling on deportation flights only for security, and shackles must not prevent emergency evacuation of the plane. So here's the problem, right? On a really long flight, first of all, circulation becomes an issue, the person becomes uncomfortable. Also, if there's an emergency, can they evacuate? Can they run out of that flight? That's a question that has not been answered. And I want to remind you that a normal flight that came from, say, Texas to Amritsar would have had 2 layovers, or at least 1 layover. This was a direct flight, there were no layovers, but it still could have been about 18 hours that we're talking about, where people were sitting handcuffed the entire time. Also, to put in some cultural context, there's a massive cultural context for handcuffing, because in the US, and also the Minister of External Affairs, Jaishankar, while he said it was standard operating procedure, I must point out to you that in the US, as soon as they arrest someone, even on the side of the street, they will handcuff that person, because that is their procedure. And they do it in order to ensure safety for everybody else. So immediately, and you've seen this in the movies, they put the person down on the ground, they handcuff them, and then they transport them handcuffed. In India, we don't handcuff. So our Supreme Court has held that handcuffing a person is a violation of fundamental rights under Article 21. The courts have repeatedly said that handcuffing should only happen when there are specific reasons and should not be routine procedure, and those reasons should be recorded in writing. So police and jail authorities only handcuff someone when they have a valid reason, like they are a threat to everybody, or there's a risk of escape, or this person has a terrible violent history, and all of these reasons have to be documented. And that is how India approaches handcuffing and how US approaches handcuffing, completely different. So US is very focused, especially when they're transporting someone, on this person is a risk, the person will run away, and so they shackle a lot. Now the question is, again, we're talking about the messaging that was sent out by the US to India in this manner, B, the treatment in transit, which is neither your law nor our law, and why it was done. Now, the New Indian Express quotes Rupali Samuel, who is an advocate of the Supreme Court, who has said that India is within its rights to lodge a complaint with the UN body over the manner in which these individuals were deported, because sometimes there are also bilateral agreements between two friendly countries on how this ought to be done. Now, we'll have to see whether such an agreement exists, but the International Covenant for Civil and Political Rights, which I told you, the United Nations Convention actually says that you should not shackle unless absolutely necessary. So there is a possibility here for India to raise a question. The thing that we're left with now is, will that question be raised? Is it likely to be raised when the Prime Minister visits the US, in a few days, and what is the likely outcome of that? But also, let's sit back and take a look at this with the larger picture of everything Donald Trump has been doing since he came into office for about 2.5 weeks. Behaving like he needs to be sending messages to the entire world. Here he seems to be sending a message to India. Is that a message that India is going to hear out politely, or do we have a strong response to that message? That's what we have to watch out for. Leave me a comment in the comment section. Let me know if you think that the US was within its rights, or if India should send back a strong response.